Happy Monday. Greetings. Welcome to a special edition of the Steve Deace Show here. Powered by Blaze TV, radio, and podcast. I'm Steve Deace. He's Todd Erzin. He's Aaron McIntyre. We're brought to you by our friends over at Relief Factor. If you're struggling with too much chronic pain, that is usually because there's too much inflammation in your joints. Well, our friends at Relief Factor, they want to do something about that. We're not making any promises, but we can give you some data, and then you can make up your own mind whether you want to give it a shot. Because over the years, about 1 million people have. 70% or so have seen such great results in 3 weeks or less. They stuck with the program long term. What is it? Well, it's a supplement. Drug-free, created by physicians, though, that can prescribe drugs. They got tired of creating and prescribing drugs that could mask symptoms, yes, but also maybe create some side effects as well. That's something that they wanted differently that would go right after the inflammation in the joints. Well, that something is Relief Factor. If you want to try the 3-week quick start, you can do so today, and it will cost you just $20 to see if you don't see a difference in your pain in 3 weeks or less when you go to relieffactor.com. Pardon me, relieffactor.com. Again, get the 3-week quick start, just $20. Find out if it's you're going to be one of the new 70% success stories at relieffactor.com. And then also, please make sure to keep supporting what we're doing here at Blaze TV. We offer our subscribers so much great individual and unique and exclusive content just for them. Right now, we've made it as inexpensive as we can for you to join us here on Blaze TV. How about just $8 a month? About 26 cents a day. I mean, you're spending $8 a day. A lot of you are on the fancy cup of coffee, right? How about $8 a month to support what we're doing here at Blaze TV? And you'll get exclusive content like Glenn's interview with President Trump, Steve Baker and team, the unraveling of the J6 narrative, Matt Kibbe and team, and the unraveling of the scandemic narrative, and more. $20 off your annual plan at blazetv.com/Deace. That's blazetv.com/Deace. Get $20 off an annual subscription with the promo code Deace for Blaze TV. Unfiltered, unafraid, and on demand. Well, today is a special edition. And if the week goes as planned, we'll have today's special edition. We will have a day off tomorrow as we are prepping for a very special edition on Wednesday that we are not going to announce ahead of time. We're just going to tease you with. Let's just say, though, all the right people are probably going to have their heads explode if we're able to pull this off and do the show that we have coming on Wednesday, gentlemen. Fair?
Yeah, a broad swath of all the right people. I mean,
yes.
Sea to shining sea.
Yes. And to tell you who those people would be would kind of give it away, so we're not going to do that. Yeah. All right? But there are people of various persuasions who will lose their dang minds, okay, if we pull this off. Correct. What we have planned on this show for Wednesday. That it's such a momentous occasion. We've got to take an entire day of the show just to prepare for it and get ready for it. Okay? Aaron, what do you think?
I think that you have a percentage in your mind right now of the chance that we actually indeed pull this off. What do you think that percentage chance is?
75.
Because that's where I am. I'm like 85.
25% chance one of us gets sick. I get MRSA again. Okay, some tragedy happens.
Oh, that's
or we get kneecapped. You know, because dude, you got to throw in the demonic attack into your ratio now too. Yeah. I mean, at least I do now. That's just part of my math nowadays. Okay, but I'm going to say about 25% it gets derailed.
We're good. All the demons are in Rome right now. You good?
Oh, for the record, just in case you didn't distinctly hear the voice, that was the Catholic saying that here, and not the two evangelicals. Just want to state that for the record. Also, in case the Illuminati's watching, that was not me. All right, that was Erzin. All right, that was a shot from the home team, not from across the bow from me. So just thought I'd state that for the record. All right. But we are excited. And if we can pull this thing off, man, Wednesday's going to be something else. If we can't, we're going to be right back here sitting in these seats, looking like the same schleps, schmucks, and morons that you're accustomed to. So there's nothing for you to lose. I mean,
it's win-win.
We're out of dignity. There's no dignity for us to lose. So there is no law. There's no L here. We are the L. All All right, so today's special edition, what is it? Let's talk about winning. This week will commemorate 100 days in office for President Trump for his second term. And I thought it would be interesting just to take a day and set all that aside. The news of the day will be there tomorrow. Of course, the day we're doing this, today is the day that the aliens will say, "Take me to your leader." Of course, that will be our luck, right? All right. But assuming that does not happen, okay, or there's not a rapture, in that case, then we're going to set aside the news of the day to talk about what time it is and what kind of trajectory we are on here at that first 100 days marker check-in. So what we have done is the three of us have each come up with 5 things that stick out to us the most about the first 100 days. Aaron has laid them out in the order he thinks we ought to discuss them. And we're just going to sit around here for the next hour and a half going over the top 15 things that we learned, excited us, we're concerned about Trump's first 100 days in office, and we're going to discuss it and then talk about what we think these things may or may not portend for the rest of Trump's days in the White House. You guys ready to go? Any thoughts leading up to this before we get started with point number 1?
There are just 2 or 3 things that kind of overlap that a few of us maybe overlapped on. And I put those together. We'll talk about them together. But I think it's telling overall that the first 100 days, we had to narrow it down to, I mean, it was not that hard to come up with 5 things that I've been not pleasantly surprised, but really grateful for or excited about. It was not that hard. We had to pare this down to the top, basically 13 topics of the first 100 days. That's a pretty good sign.
Agreed. Todd, what do you think?
Yeah, thankfully, we have the luxury of this being a fun exercise. It won't be one where we're passing around the firearm to one another in a game of Russian roulette. There was no way of knowing for sure how this was going to get out of the gate after the first 100 days, and so far there have been quite a few blessings.
As you guys sat down to do these 5, I found for me the 5 I wanted to highlight just kind of, they came to me in about 5 minutes.
Yep.
Did you guys? But I also try to come up with, in my case, and we'll tell you guys as we go through this, which one of us each selected the particular lesson that we're discussing or talking point that we're discussing at that given moment. I try to come up with broad things so that I would not intentionally overlap everybody. There's one very specific thing that we'll get to probably towards the end of today's show. But did you guys have difficulty coming up with your list or anything like that?
No, mine are pretty broad. Todd has more specifics, but mine are pretty, broadly specific. We'll put it that way.
100% worldview score in action right there.
That gives you broadly specific.
Or specifically broad, I don't know.
Why not both? Yes. Is it better to be feared or respected? Why not both, right, Mr. Stark? All right, before we get to the list, let's tell you about our friends over at Fast Growing Trees. They've got the biggest online nursery in the United States with thousands of different plants, over 2 million happy customers. And when we say thousands of different plants, by the way, their online menu has over 6,000 plants that fit any space whatsoever, from fruit trees to full-sized privacy trees, even indoor plants as well. They've got a 14-point checklist to help you ensure you're getting the best quality plant possible. You can get support from their trained plant experts on call to help you plan your landscape, choose the right plants, and learn how to care for them. So this spring, and it doesn't matter, you have a big yard, small yard, they've got you covered. And they've got the best deals as well for your yard this spring, up to half off on their selected plants and other deals. And if you're part of our show, with the code Deace, you can get 15% off your first order on top of their daily already low pricing as well. All right, that's an additional 15% off with the code Deace when you go to fastgrowingtrees.com. That's fastgrowingtrees.com. It'll be delivered right there to your door as convenient as possible. Take that additional 15% off your first order with the code Deace at fastgrowingtrees.com. Offer is valid for a limited time. Terms and conditions may apply. All right, let's get to number 1. 15 things we learned from Trump's first 100 days. I'm going to start with me here. I'm flirting with optimism for the first time. Now, let me quantify what this does and does not mean. Because, I apologize in advance for all those that will accuse me of belaboring a point, because I think we all understand we are living in an era where critical thinking is really at maximum output. Nuanced understanding is something that is it's easy as pie to the average American. People don't really overreact a lot. Don't immediately tribalistically side a situation up and determine whether or not you are in their particular tribe at any given moment, whether or not they agree or disagree. And so because we are in this sort of era where faith and reason are really at their apex here, none of that's true. And so that's why I need to define what I do and do not mean by this, before I then tell you why I'm flirting with this. What I don't mean, and I cannot believe I have to say this, but if we're being honest, I do. What I don't mean is that I am in 1,000% agreement with absolutely everything. It's all proceeding exactly as I have foreseen it. I have no complaints. I have no, what are we doing? That's not what it means. What it does mean is that overall, I can see what we're trying to do. And I'm going to say we, because I absolutely believe we're in a cold civil war. And these are the two coalitions at war at the moment. I mean, you're either a Union or you're a Confederate. We're in a civil war. We're not having typical political parlance here, where there's plenty of opportunities to draw distinctions and build coalitions. We're in a cold civil war. So the reality is, you're either aligned with Trump or you're aligned with them. I'm not necessarily that comfortable with that kind of alignment. It's not necessarily been the native ecosystem of how I've done my show for many, many years, right? And I think for believers, we should not be comfortable with these kinds of environments as a default setting, okay? When things are in a healthier situation, believers should struggle to find themselves seamlessly fitting into such, earthly and worldly contrasts. But when situations are very stark, and there will be one way of life or there will be another. For example, you might be a 5-point Calvinist, and you're very thankful, though, as you got off the boat there on Juno Beach on June 6, 1944, that the secular Jewish guy next to you who thinks that the Lord Jesus' name is a swear word that he uses as a conjunction, what's your function? You'd be very thankful that he jumped in front of you and took that bullet for you that was intended for you, that came from the Nazi snipers up on the hill. You know what I'm saying? Now, there may be existential beliefs as that spirit-filled believer with the secular Jew, who probably know more about Judaism than he does. You have some serious existential belief differences, correct?
Yes.
In fact, your eternal destinations might even be different, correct?
Might be.
But in that particular moment, given the existential level of conflict being waged, you praise the Lord for that man that was blaspheming his name not just 10 seconds ago, that jumped in front of you and took that bullet that had your name on it from a shared enemy. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
I think in those situations, it's an either-or situation. It's survival or death. And I think culturally we are in this situation in the West. I've not thought this all the time about Trump and his coalition. Frankly, I've often not thought it. And when I started this last election cycle, when I said from the very beginning that I'm going to support him if he's the nominee, my reasoning was just nothing more basic than we can't afford these people being in power anymore, and life was just better in 2018 and 2019 than it has been since they took over. I mean, how many times did I just say that over and over again? I really had nothing more in-depth than that. Then July 13th happened. And I would say even more importantly, the way that Trump has responded and reacted to July 13th happened. More direction, more purpose, more mission, more discipline. At the same time, more heart, more courage. And now now it became clear to me he does on some level. We're all limited by our own worldviews, me included. But on some level now, he understands what time it is and understands the level of existential conflict we're going for here. So I will, at that point, I will follow him as the general. Doesn't mean, by the way, every captain in the army agrees with every decision the general makes. And generals make bad decisions. But it does mean there's a time and a place to air those disagreements and grievances, and certainly not in the midst of the battle in a way that would aid and abet the shared enemy. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. So that is what I mean. And with that said, this is the closest we've come. And I say this again as someone that if I really put my mind to it, I could come up with 10 things every day that I'm like, got to do that different, got to address that, can't do this, can't do that. But it does finally seem as if some force for good is corporately emerging to push back against the spirit of the age. Is that fair?
Yeah.
Doesn't mean it's exactly in the form that I would have chosen it, but I'm not God. And what do I know? But there is some corporate systemic resistance to the spirit of the age. Unfortunately, it didn't come from the church like I had hoped and planned. But you fight wars with the soldiers that you have. And I sense from the messaging, which I'll get to later on, the tactics, the planning, which I'll get to later on, overall, from a meta sense, doesn't mean in the micro I agree with every single tactical decision, but in the meta sense, I now sense that there's a shared missiology here. It's not just I've got 50 million issues with Donald Trump, but he doesn't hate me, and so that's good enough for me right now. But something more than that. At least this is just speaking for me. I sense a shared missiology. Not just a shotgun political marriage of convenience, of the lesser of two evils, or the devil you know, but in this case, we have a shared mission. Doesn't mean we agree with each other all the time, but the mission we do agree on. And that's why for the first time in my career, I'm flirting with optimism. All right, I went too long on that one, but since it was very meta, I wanted to kind of explain it. You guys have any quick thoughts before we move on?
Well, I'm very optimistic as well because you talked early on, you didn't foresee this. Well, yeah, neither did I. I know Aaron will say that on some level, but also because we didn't deserve this. I mean, all the L's that Trump took, COVID, impeachment, various forms of early lawfare, losing the 2022 midterms, there was a lot of reason to believe that this couldn't happen. The fact that it did, and really, even though it didn't deserve it. You can't look this gift in the mouth. You have got to simply bend the knee and say, thank you. We must all stand a post now and do what we can with it.
Yep. And just very briefly, every time that I'm tempted to think, oh, are we really, what are we really doing here? You wake up some morning and they're arresting corrupt judges. It seems like that's kind of been a pattern. Every time where I'm about to, oh man, are we really sure we know what we're doing? They come back and they reassure you one way or another. That's just something that I've noticed from this first 100 days. Well said. All right, let's march on. These are together because I think we're talking about the same thing. So there was a plan. That's from you. Yep. And from me, flooding the zone. All right, since I talked way too much in number one, I'm going to defer to you. And then if there's some overlap that wasn't discussed in number two, I'll double back on that. So what I'm talking about here is, given how buttoned down the Trump transition team was and how disciplined in their message in the interim between the election and inauguration, I'd kind of hoped, slightly suspected that maybe this was the plan. But on day one, absolutely flooding the zone. And this was like 2 weeks of executive orders. And you saw it even in the last week, there's been a flurry of executive orders on some very important things. They really put themselves off to a good start here. And they really put Democrats and the machine back on its heels. And I think that was really important because there was no general Mike. If I remember correctly, the Mike Flynn thing was very, very early in Trump's first administration, right out the gate, seemingly. If I remember correctly, I could be mistaken there. But flooding the zone immediately, that's something that is very helpful, and I think it can continue to be helpful just to exhaust as many resources from the opposition as possible.
I'm with you. You gave the most vivid example of my overall theme. I mean, I have to hold myself accountable to the same standard I held others. One of the key reasons I supported DeSantis in the primary is I didn't see a plan for what to do if they lock Trump up. If they make him a convicted felon, they lock him up. He's under house arrest. He can't campaign. These are all things that were on the table throughout the first half of last year. And then they tried something even more drastic than that, killing him. Okay. And so how many times and how many columns did we write and say on this show, what's the plan? What's the plan? Okay. We vote for Trump and then what do? What's the plan? Well, it was very clear, and Aaron just pointed out the most vivid example of it, that this time there was a plan. And here's the thing I think you can also see is that when you have an overall plan. Now, here's the thing. Everyone's got a plan, as Mike Tyson used to famously say, until you get punched in the mouth, right? But when you go in with an overall plan, the chances that you'll be able to adjust on the fly when you do get punched back, like what happened with the tariff battle, was very clear early on. The unrolling of that did not go as seamless as what they were planning. But because they're now not, the meta now is not just off the cuff, but there's a missiology. There's a Rosetta Stone, Todd, to keep coming back to, all right? A plumb line to keep coming back to. They managed just within a couple of days to adjust and get on a unified message that, put a lot of people at ease, when that's the kind of thing in his first term that would have been paralyzing for a week, if not more, right? Yeah. And that's why, to me, it is important to have a plan, maybe another way, because I don't want to make it look like a plan is, 75 levels of something. How about a vision?
Yes.
Okay. We can call it that too, a vision. All right. What's the mission and the vision of what we're trying to accomplish here? Right. And it's very clear that they have one this time. And you can just see that because it's filtered down to the superior execution and messaging that we have seen comprehensively across the board. So that's exactly what I was alluding to, Aaron, and you just gave the best example of it.
And you'll recall way back in 2016, first term, before he got into office, flooding the zone was my advice to him back then.
It was.
You can't. The media. Even if you have a great plan on one issue, the media just circles the wagons and does its own negative messaging and lies and lies and lies. They can't keep up with everything going on right now. This is a smart play, quite frankly, for any administration, right or left, going forward. I mean, just to stop the constant feng shui of wordsmithing is ultimately you as dangerous to you as it is to the other side. Messaging is important. Having things be nothing but word games is ultimately going to be as likely a loser for you as anybody else. Just start doing stuff.
And that's so key. Let's use a sports analogy. You can be Michael frickin' Jordan, but you're not going to go 20 from 20 from the field. The other team's playing hard too. You might be by far the best player on the court, but they're going to steal it from you a couple times. They're going to block a shot or two. You're going to miss a few just on your own, even if they don't do those things right. So Michael Jordan, was he any greater of a player in 1996 than he was in 1988? Probably not. If anything, he's got another 8 years of tread on his tires, right? So why is he winning NBA titles in 1996 and not 1998, not 1988? Well, he had Scottie Pippen, another Hall of Famer, Horace Grant, another perennial All-Star. You see what I'm saying? Now there are more things that he can throw at the opposition, which makes him an even greater player than he was when he was solely on his own. That's kind of what you're alluding to there.
All right, ready to move on?
You bet.
4 and 5. The fourth is from Todd. RFK Jr. gives autism moms their moment, along with Hegseth restoring unjabbed service members. And 5 is from me, the defense of Pete Hegseth. Todd, do you want to go first?
Well, the first one is a long time coming, as I've said to you before. The number of actual mothers who had this child on this day. These shots happened, and it was this child on this day. And they know it. They saw it. And they've gone to people and said, what is this? And the so-called experts just lied to their face and said, nah, you really don't have a case here. The fact that now, in their long suffering, they were the original Moms for Liberty. They have carried this thing on for so long and are the reason that RFK Jr., this version is RFK Jr. and not just fighting windmills and environmentalism or all the other things. This thing transformed him as a human being. They did that, and they deserve this moment of justice. And then, obviously, the scope of that level of injury leading to a new birth of dedication as citizens. We saw that with COVID. People who never thought much about vaccination or autism or things like that now had a toe in the pool that they didn't want to put there, but they realized, I better start learning how to swim in this environment, otherwise game over. And the soldiers who stood up at the risk of court-martial were an early vanguard of what was necessary in the face of all of the Faucian lies. So both are now receiving a level of justice. It's hard to stand in the gap when so many people are calling you names and lying, but they did it, and they're heroes because of it.
Amen. Mine is the defense of Pete Hegseth. Now, I know this, technically what I'm about to say, happened before the inauguration, or much of it did anyway. And I have been critical of, dismissive of, annoyed with the online influencer / army that President Trump wields. But I'm telling you, they're getting full marks on this story. Because when the confirmation process started for Pete Hegseth, you will recall there was an all-out assault from people wearing R or red uniforms on Hegseth. Joni Ernst, Tom Tillis. You'll remember Tom Tillis at the last minute tried to get his sister-in-law or something like that.
That's right. I forgot.
To try to in the pages of the New York Times.
Yep.
And you'll also recall President Trump was pretty quiet about the entire process. I think what kept Hegseth afloat during that time was Trump's online army of influencers saying, nope, we're not. This is your first nomination and you're trying to tank him already? No, you don't just get to Kavanaugh any of Trump's picks. I would even dare say that putting the line in the sand there, and I'm giving his online army full credit for this, or even having a Hegseth, putting the line in the sand there might be an indication why President Trump pretty much got his entire cabinet confirmed except for one guy, and that's Dave Weldon.
You could very well be right.
And so I think, and again, I know this happened before the first 100 days, I think they deserve a lot of credit for this because President Trump was pretty quiet during that time, and I'm sure he has his own reasons for that. It was his own army making sure that all of those GOP senators towed the line. And I think you cannot undercount or undervalue what kind of a precedent that set for the rest of the administration, because they are still coming out like clockwork, coming after Hegseth every single week. So, again, that's very encouraging. And I know it was before the first 100 days, but very encouraging to me.
All right, I want to follow up on both of these after the break. Before we get to the break, though, in these unprecedented times, make sure that if you're going to venture into this new thing, maybe you forgot what it was called the real estate market, because we haven't had much of one of those for the last few years between Let's Go Brandon and the Scamdemic, where we're trying to make that great again as well. If you're going into the real estate market now more than ever before, a lot's changed over the last few years since you were last in it. Make sure you've got an agent that knows those changes, can help you navigate those rough, murky waters through them, and get you to a successful outcome with a proven track record of success that we have verified. Otherwise, we wouldn't recommend them to you, and you're going to find them where the name says it all. realestateagentsitrust.com. That's where you can go. Get hooked up with an agent that oftentimes will be from right here in this audience, so you share values in common as well. realestateagentsitrust.com. We can help you whether you're going statewide, nationwide. Ultimately, what you want to do is get through this, which can be a stressful process, even in the best of times, let alone unprecedented ones, with the best practices and outcomes. Get an agent that'll get you there at realestateagentsitrust.com. We'll come back, and I want to follow up on both Pete Hegseth and RFK Jr. here in a moment.
The Steve Deace Show.
right, back here on a special edition of the Steve Deace Show as we are looking back at the 15 things we liked the most, learned the most about Trump's first 100 days. And Aaron, throw back up there the last graphic from you and Todd so people know again what we're responding to. So Todd talking about RFK Jr. giving autism moms their moment, Hegseth restoring the unjabbed service members, and then Aaron just talked about the defense of Pete Hegseth and how big of a role that may have played in getting way more of Trump's cabinet approved than any of us would have predicted when it was originally laid out. And again, just to show you, we're just about telling what we think is the truth here. So we've kind of had a mostly hate and love to hate relationship with a lot of Trump's online grift corps over the years on this show, right?
Yeah.
But Aaron pointing out, hey, those guys did yeoman's work on behalf of Pete Hegseth, and he may not have gotten approved if they had not done that. And so let's give them props that they earned. So the worker is worth his hire, as the word says. All right, I want to talk about the ramifications of, well, Aaron, you kind of already got into the ramifications of number 5 here and the role that played in drawing a marker saying, hey, we're not going to let you just piecemeal deconstruct these nominees. So I don't think we need to belabor that point. Let's talk about RFK Jr. for a second, because for a large sector of this audience, and I would be among them, I mean, Trump appointing him as head of HHS would have justified voting for Trump, just the return on that investment alone. But there have been some questions, concerns. We've even discussed a couple. And now with the benefit of more time, as we look over the course of 100 days, Bobby Jr. went through confirmation before Jay did, before Marty did. So essentially, the pre-existing bureaucracy was as is, and then he was put in charge of HHS. The people that would serve, if he's the general there, the people who would serve as colonels or captains, okay, had not yet been approved until the last month or so. All right. If we look at that with the benefit of hindsight, it appears that he purposefully laid low on several things to get as far into this process as possible. I think his messaging has become, and I say that because his messaging has also gotten more aggressive in the last few weeks, on multiple fronts, since this team has been put in place. I think also after what happened with Dave Weldon and everything else, where they kind of had to eat. That's the one that they couldn't get past. They kind of had to eat the poop sandwich on that one. I think also kind of working your way to the top. Let's start with the food dyes. Let's start with this. Let's start with that. Now, have you noticed in the last few days, now we're talking about the toxic genetic serums, the COVID vaccines now, and whether they should get removed altogether, starting with the kids, right? We're starting now to have some of the conversations that I think many of us anticipated we were going to have day one. And not Bobby Kennedy writing pieces for Fox about the MMR vaccine. Okay, he is doing nothing to lower expectations for this study to come in September on what are the true causes of the massive escalation in autism. Since the 1980s. There have been talks about banning big pharma ads from TV. We've seen Moderna and Pfizer's stocks take massive tumbles as well. So, Todd, this is your native habitat here. Okay, we're all, Aaron and I are Aaron's wife kind of comes out of some of this too, but
not originally. This is something we've adopted.
Okay, so yeah, we're all recently. We're all immigrants here. Okay, you're the native son. All right. So, do you sense some form of an unveiling of a plan, a strategy here, and how this has kind of been coaxed little by little? What do you think?
I thought there was a plan all along, and I think I don't know if it's I think you use the term laying low. I think that is one way to put it, or just saying, hey, let's we're going to put all of our cards on the table. We're going to treat each other as professionals. When he says gold standard science, that resonates with a lot of people. Mm-hmm. I'm going to give everybody a shot to do this the easy way. And I've fundamentally believed that ultimately, when push comes to shove, this being a lifetime opportunity for him, he'd do it the hard way. But it's a smart way to go that way because, as I've told you, if you're the autism moms, you understand the monster you're dealing with, and you understand it wasn't just going to happen. A lot of the people that have the biggest problem with why it's not happening right now are people who just came to this during COVID. And they felt like this all came upon them suddenly, including possible injuries to them or their loved ones. And now they want justice, and they still don't understand the game and how this didn't just start with COVID.
Right.
The roots are so deep and have been planted for so long. The only time I really had an issue with it, I don't have an issue with the patience. I think there's no way to do it without patience. The one totally unforced error is the column you mentioned where he actually sings the praises of the. I think he was still trying to do the same thing.
While Children's Self-Defense, the organization he founded, their pinned tweet is don't ever take this vaccine.
That was the equivalent of William Dafoe saying, well, hey, I'm something of a homosexual myself. Don't do that. I
love that meme. I bust it out June 1st every year. I love that meme.
Laying low is one thing. Just trying to massage that. No, then all kinds of people are like, say what? No. So a mistake. But other than that, thank God we have, well, as you say rightly, because of the election, 2 years to do it. I was about to say 4 years, but I wish it could all happen in a day. But the evil we're dealing with is, nefarious.
I wonder, one more point on this. Amy and I had in our home for many years a painting of a statue that, after we got converted, really hit home from us for each of us with the first kind of discipleship course we took as believers, and we took it together. And there's this statue that they bring out, and it's a porcelain statue. Well, it's a man who's in porcelain, right, signifying purity, but he's like breaking free of this like black tar substance that like covered him from head to toe, every morsel of his body. All right. And the statue signifies what it means to be born again, to come out of sin. Okay. And it's a very powerful visual. And the discipleship program that was associated with said, imagine your every inch of your body, including sectors of your body you didn't even know were there, all covered by Band-Aids because of the impact of sin, both that it's had on you, that you've committed, and then the sins that others have committed against you, right? And those Band-Aids have been there for some of us since the day we were born, right? And depending on how old you are, those Band-Aids could just be really hard, and tethered to the skin, almost like they're fused with the skin, right? And imagine if God came along, okay, and said, we're going to rip all those Band-Aids off at one time. And the excruciating, and by the way, the word excruciating, what's that come from? Comes from crucifixion. Yeah, that's the root word of the meaning. The excruciating pain it would be to remove all of those Band-Aids that are on hairs and pores, and they're tied into your body and they're deeply embedded into the skin. How excruciating that would be all at once. And so the statue symbolizes the sanctification progress of how over time he who has begun a good work in you is faithful to complete it until the day of completion. And they come off little by little. And then when you built up more tolerance for the pain of what it means to remove this scarring, they take some of the deeply embedded ones off, right? Until the day finally comes, you get called home and you're out. You're completely removed from the stain of what sin has done as all creation groans, right? I bring that up as a metaphor here because in a limited capacity, if RFK Jr. rolled out day one all the way, everything he thinks, and then everything maybe he thinks he could even prove, would it just freak the entire culture out and turn everybody against him?
I know this audience probably just can't compute on this because I get it, but you forget most people that voted for Trump still think on some level that Armageddon is avoided because of the mRNA vaccines.
80% of American adults took at least one dose of the jab.
And there might be, we might have to deal with the fact there were some negative things now, but they still did some good. Most Republicans still think that, even in the face of growing evidence to the contrary. That's the reality we're dealing with.
Want to add anything to that, Aaron, before we move on?
No, I think that's good.
Okay.
I just, again, you can do this in a way that excuses incompetence or excuses substandard, and that's not the way that I mean this at all. I just mean this in a way, this is undeserved grace that God has given us that we don't have President Kamala right now. These conversations are so much more fun and so much more constructive, I think.
I don't think we can say that enough, frankly, because I think it explains to both the audience and reminds ourselves kind of our own metaverse here, of our own premise of, again, let me use another analogy. The Lord saved our marriage 5 years ago, and it's never been better than it is right now. Does that mean we have not had a single argument in the last 5 years? Does that mean my wife and I have not been disappointed with one another at all in the last 5 years? Does that mean my wife and I have been completely pleased with the decisions and the words made and the words spoken by each other for the last 5 years? And there have been no disagreements, even debates or arguments or disappointments during that time. Is that what that means?
Probably not.
No. But in the meta of, see, now we see these events through the filter, Aaron, of where our marriage once was. And so we say that to each other now. I like the arguments we have now and the disagreements we have now more than the ones we used to have and we were having before. You see what I'm saying? Because they're happening from different frameworks and premises now than the place before, which is how soon can I just blow this entire thing up called a family because I can't live like this anymore. They're just way more constructive than destructive, and that's what you're saying there.
Correct.
Yeah.
Correct.
Nothing wrong with it. Nothing wrong with reminding ourselves of that. It's called perspective.
Yes, indeed. And again, I think depending on the receiver of that message, they may, well, that's just a way to just sweep everything under the rug. No, it's just, guys, we lived under Joe Biden's handlers for 4 years. It would have been even worse with Kamala Harris, most likely. Okay, he dodged a bullet. And now we got to dodge a bullet because he did.
All it means now in our marriage, too, is every time I say something Amy's disappointed with or do something she's disappointed by, she doesn't start from a premise of he doesn't love me, doesn't care about me, and wants out of the marriage. She starts with a premise of, hey, that hurt me. I didn't like that. What's going on here? What don't I know? You see what I'm saying? The same problem, looking at it from a completely different perspective. That's all we're saying.
Yep. All right, next one. This is from you, Steve. Number 6, even the guy we thought was the worst cabinet pick, that would be Scott Bessant, has been cash money, homie, no pun intended, of course, Treasury Secretary.
Yes. I mean, I remember, remember right after the election, I said, guys, this has got to work. I'm going to give a lot of grace here. Okay. And I did until Scott Bessant came out, and I forgot that I said that. Okay.
He is a cash money homosexual.
Yes. Yeah. Now you're really doing the thing. I'm quite a homosexual myself.
He's a homosexual
I'm like, oh, hell no.
Secretary.
Well, Anthony Scaramucci wasn't available. Okay. Of all the people to be the Treasury Secretary for Mr. Populist, we are going to go get an insider's insider who, with a gay lover and adopted kid. I'm like, what in the world is this? Okay. And scene. Now, again, I have existential differences with Scott Bessant that him and I are not able to reconcile in this life. So one of two things will happen. According to my worldview, one of two things will happen. His worldview probably has a different math here, but according to my worldview, one of two things will happen. And that is that Scott will come to Jesus and see the error of his ways and repent. Or on the other side of eternity, he'll wish that he had. Those are basically the only choices according to our worldview, right? Those are the two options of ultimately reconciling the existential differences between Scott Bessant and ourselves, right?
Sure.
However, remember this whole thing called love your neighbor as you love yourself? Remember that whole thing? How we spent a good deal of time recently talking about, hey guys, I know we turn it into a toxic empathy idol, but we still have to do that like in its proper context. Aaron, you did an example of that a few minutes ago. Hey, I cannot stand this Trump grifter core. We've been on the wrong side of him how many times over the years? But man, we probably don't win that P. Hegseth thing without him. So God bless him. Appreciate the help.
Correct.
That's an example of loving your neighbor as yourself. Okay? Where you don't want to be just prejudged based on your past or anything all the time, but you want to be looked at for whatever pursuits and virtues you exhibit at this particular moment as well. You see what I'm saying? The full context of you. That's what you want, right? Mm-hmm. So we should do that for our neighbor at the same time, right? So do I have in the background, are there these still irreconcilable existential worldview differences with us and Scott Bessant?
Yep.
But in the foreground, has he not been an outstanding public servant? Not just like above our expectations, but frankly outstanding. I mean, he's done a better job messaging Trump's economics than he has. He's been outstanding. And I have to tell you, the genius of picking him, I can kind of see it now, because he's now going back to the enclaves where he comes from. He's going back now to the groups and peer groups that he hails from. I mean, what was it, last week? He went back to his own peeps and said, all you guys care about is Green New Deal market caps and gender studies. You're not really the capitalist you claim to be. You're not really, just the whores for... If you were, we'd be fine, because I'm one of those too. But you won't. You guys really aren't the whores for profit that you claim to be. You're prophets of the new age, so just admit it. And if that's who you guys are going to be, well, then we're going to look out for our own interests then. We're no longer doing Adam Smith's Wealth of Nations. We're doing mercantilism, and you want to impose your agenda on us. So guess what? We're going to start imposing our agenda on you, how you like them apples. Now, that's a potent message if either three of us says it, right? But if one of the three of us says it to this group of people, they're probably just tuning us out, right? Imagine having Scott Bessant come from, he was just at their Ritz-Carlton getaway there on in Barbados last year, okay? And now he's come back, okay? But it's not to hang out, all right? It's to dish it out. That stings, I would imagine, a little bit, hearing that from a guy from your own subculture, right? He's been an outstanding public service, and he'd have been our public servant, and he'd have been the one we all would have been 100% confident, based on his background and worldview, would have been the most disastrous choice of them all.
Yes, and since this is probably the last time of this top 15 that Scott Bessant in particular will be brought up, I want to get out of the way, if we had time anyway, an honorable mention submission. It's the screaming matches and fights that have been reported on between Elon Musk and various members of the cabinet. I'm serious. The most recent one that was reported on was between Scott Bessant and Elon Musk. And I guess they went, according to Axios, they went chest to chest, screaming at each other. And Scott Bessant, I guess there's a point at which the mild-mannered homosexual does actually reach a point where he screams back. And it was reported on, buried down, all the way down, what they were actually fighting about is that they were both in agreement that the IRS needs major changes. They were just arguing about who gets to do it. I'm fine with fighting. Fighting is good.
By all means, I think you should fight to the death on that, in fact.
Who gets to
give them weapons
first?
That's right. Give one an axe and then one a sword, and just let them have at it.
Yeah, yes. That's my honorable mention, fighting.
There's a lesson in this. Both sides, at their worst, have done this, that if you think one thing is bad, you make everything bad about a human being.
Yes.
What if you find excellence in one lane? And if you give that a chance, it brings out excellence in other lanes as well. We should learn from that. Because
here's the thing. When we honor the gifts of our neighbors, even if we don't agree with their overall worldview, we're ultimately honoring the gift giver.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right? Amen. Hour 2 is next. Back here with a special edition of the Steve Deace Show, marking Trump's first 100 days in office. And if all goes well, no show tomorrow because we are prepping for a very big show on Wednesday, one that will make heads explode, will make people go back and rewatch Ghostbusters and learn what happens when you cross the streams, if we can pull it off. All right, I'm giving us about 75% odds we're going to be able to pull this thing off, and you will see said special show on Wednesday. If we cannot pull it off, we'll just be back here again looking like the losers we already were. So really not much to lose. Just further embarrassment of ourselves. But at this point, we've embarrassed ourselves so many times that we're almost...
And plan to do it again.
Indeed. And we'll do so even when we do not plan to do so, in fact. All right, so let us know what you think about what we think as we are marking Trump's first 100 days, the things that we learned, the things that we liked, and are looking forward to. Steve at stevedeace.com. You can email us on this or anything else there. You can also like us on Facebook, MeWe, and Gab. Follow me at Steve Deace Show on X, Instagram, and TikTok. Don't forget to subscribe to our brand new YouTube channel where we're starting all over there because of all the censorship we got there on our previous channel. So we're starting all over at Deace Show on YouTube, at Deace Show on YouTube. And then finally, we would greatly appreciate it if you're a podcast listener. If you love the show, leave us a 5-star review. Thank you to the tens of thousands of you who have. Also, make sure to hit subscribe, or if you're on iTunes or Apple, follow, and that'll assure that every time we do a new episode, it shows up there in your feed each and every single time. So thank you for that as well. All right, and also, let me mention this. June 3rd is a big day, just in time for the most demonic time of the year. My next book, we've been working on this under wraps, top secret for the last year. And when you see it, you're going to see why. You're also going to see why we had to take this thing all the way to Hungary to get it illustrated. All right. Richie Meets the Rainbow is the website to get updates. RichieMeetsTheRainbow.com. As you will see what happens when this teacher right here attempts to corrupt our young skull of mush, as Rush Limbaugh used to say, Richie. But see, Richie has a secret weapon against this teacher and against the spirit of the age and against the system. A secret weapon. It's a scarce secret weapon. It is a very rare, precious secret weapon. But when available, it is still a weapon of mass destruction. Nevertheless, what am I talking about? You'll see. When you get Richie Meets the Rainbow. Pre-sales will begin here in a couple of weeks. We're going to start with a special edition for audience members. All right, you guys are going to get a special Pride Month edition. We'll tell you what that entails coming up here in a couple of weeks before it goes live to the rest of the country on June the 3rd. RichieMeetsTheRainbow.com. All right, this part of the show brought to you by our friends over at Freedom Project Academy. If you're already looking ahead to the next school year, and you should before things fill up, all right, check out our friends at Freedom Project Academy because they have perfected the art of online learning for the last 15 years, offering live, anytime homeschool courses for students in kindergarten through high school built on Judeo-Christian values. FPA is dedicated to mastery of subject matter, where students read full books, write in cursive, study the full scope of history, learn how to think, not what to think, and graduate with wisdom years above their public school peers. And to celebrate those 15 years, FPA offering their largest discount ever. Go to freedomforschool.com, freedomforschool.com. And yes, our son Noah was enrolled in FPA for a couple of years, so I can personally attest to how good they are at this. freedomforschool.com, and you'll save 15% off all their courses when you use the code STEVE15. That's STEVE15 for 15% off. STEVE15 is the code at freedomforschool.com. Take back your child's education with code STEVE15 at freedomforschool.com. All right, let's continue. We are looking at each of us submitted a top 5 list to Aaron of the top 5 things we either witnessed, looked forward to, learned from Trump's first 100 days. Aaron sorted that list, and what number are we on now?
So let's recap, shall we? So number 1, Steve is flirting with optimism for the first time. Steve is relieved there was a plan. I was pleased with flooding the zone at the very beginning, and still to this day on some level. Todd is happy with Hegseth restoring unjabbed service members and RFK Jr. giving autism moms their moment. I was pleased with the defense of Pete Hegseth from Trump's online influencer army. And there's this one from Steve. Even the guy we thought was the worst cabinet pick has been a cash money homosexual, because he's the homosexual Treasury Secretary. Did you mean it that way?
No, I just meant cash money homie. Yeah. But you're right. I missed a double entendre there, so thank you for finding it.
He's a homosexual.
Yes, a homosexual. Yes.
Next one is number 7. It's from me. It's Marco Rubio. Now, we had a submission on buy, sell, or hold last week that very much echoed a thought that I'd had, and I just wanted to see things play out a little bit longer. But Marco Rubio, I thought he would be a fine Secretary of State pick. I think that was kind of up his alley. What I did not expect was the level of aggression with not only messaging President Trump's foreign policy, but also the aggression on acting on it. Marco Rubio is the guy who is cracking down on pro-Hamas terrorist sympathizers, infiltrating college campuses. And he's been very aggressive in defending that policy, very aggressive on stating the facts about what the United States policy is. He's been, and you'll see this, there are a couple of guys when there are Oval Office meetings that Trump defers to quite a bit. There are 3 guys, well, there are a few guys, but Stephen Miller would be one. But there are 2 that, and I can't believe this didn't even make our list, but J.D. Vance is, I think it's an obvious one, so maybe that's why it didn't make any of our lists. But J.D. Vance is one, and Marco Rubio is another one that Trump defers to quite a bit. So I have been pleasantly surprised with Marco Rubio. Do I think he's overall maybe gotten a bad rap in his career? I don't know. You do the Gang of 8, you kind of deserve what's coming to you after that. Mm-hmm. But he is definitely redeeming himself as we speak, because he's done a good job just in the first 100 days. To a level that I didn't really see coming.
I mean, he's been outstanding as a Secretary of State. I've come to the conclusion that he has had a change of heart on some things, or he's just a sociopath, because he is arguing points with great conviction that absolutely run counter.
Conviction. That's a good word for it.
I mean, with obvious conviction that obviously run counter to kind of the bushy view of the world. He's out of that wing of the Republican Party. Now, hey, I came out of that wing because that comes out of the Reagan era, we're America, and I had to learn some things the hard way that challenged my preconceptions. So I'll give him the benefit of the doubt because he's arguing things with conviction that do go against his pre-existing positions. So he's either had a change of heart on some things, or the dude is a sociopath.
Yeah, I think all of us in our lives, some more so than others, we're willing to just not play by the rules at all because they're stupid and unproductive. And there's other times we say, like, if I don't play by the rules right now, I'm my own end game. I got to live to fight another day. And I think Rubio was a guy who, too much by default, instead of shattering paradigms that he could have, he just said, I got to play by these rules. These are just the rules. And now I think he didn't necessarily do it. But now that those rules aren't there anymore, I think he's like, well, this is my preference. I just really wasn't going to fight for that hard. Now he's unencumbered, like many people are. And maybe it took a bullet flying by Trump's head for that to happen. But here he is now, and he's clearly freed up.
I like it.
Next, number 8, this is from Todd. Trump's executive order on protecting women's sports.
Particularly as it applies to the photo op. And we've had this amazing legislative run here in Iowa going back to 2022. But this level of courage of conviction has all happened since the Save Girls Sport Act in 2022, which was led by my daughter, who gathered about 50 of her closest track and soccer friends from the greater Des Moines area to go down to a subcommittee to be the face of that thing. And instantly, in the face of that, the Democrats went for hours and caucused just to make those girls go away because they knew it was a game over. And ever since then, the speeches that happened out of that, obviously Governor Kim Reynolds was with my daughter all along. But the speeches that happened from the people, they've carried through for now 3 sessions in a row on not only the gender issue, but all kinds of issues. And that's why the photo op that just made the left seat afterwards at the signing with Governor Reynolds surrounded by a table full of girls who made this possible. And then Trump did that as well. And he put his stamp on that because this isn't... Ultimately, our faith is incarnate, and all of these issues are incarnate, and it is about those lives. And again, just like with the autism moms, to see the ones who fought at the end when the demons were coming out. There's a reason I'm at the Catholic Refuge at Des Moines Christian, because my kids were harassed on a regular basis by the LGBT crowd. And to have that moment and to everybody see it, and Trump to be the guy with, the most unlikely of guys. But there it was, because so many stood by and did nothing while the demons came. Well, they were on the run that day, and it was a beautiful thing to see in that photo op.
President Trump has always had, or Donald Trump, I guess I should say, because this predates him becoming president, has had a knack for heaping hot coals upon people's head. Now, sometimes those people didn't deserve it. Sometimes they did. An example of one way that this manifests is in a debate. He looks down at Rand Paul. Rand shouldn't even be here this evening. It's things like that. Another way, though, in this newest iteration of Trump is what you saw in that photo op. It heaped hot coals upon the enemy's heads, because that's the party of feminism over there. And yet Trump has this photo op where he is affirmatively standing up for girls and women. That's just a fact, and they can't deal with that. It also cuts another way, too. Another group of people who a photo op like that heaps, or at least should heap, hot coals upon their heads. Pastors, that should have been you there. Mm-hmm. That should have been you. And it's not. It's him leading this fight. So that's a great pick, Todd.
It is. Can't say it any better than what Aaron just said, man. You knocked that out of the park there, brother, to follow up with why Todd selected as a point. So let's move on.
This one is also from Todd, number 9, the tariff wars.
Yeah, You
just want to tell us how you were sympathetic to this from the beginning, which you were, that you saw from the beginning that Trump's tariffs could be a cudgel of leverage, which you did. Okay. So, insufferability is one of your genuinely most charming traits, and you just wanted to reset that for us.
Correct. But
since you owned it, it's good. All right.
But
all right, we're good then.
There's also a mea culpa. One of the I came to terms with the fact before I stated that I could see that clearly because I realized my own error. I believe that free trade is one of the greatest lies that I've accepted in my political lifetime. Not as a theory, but as a application.
Mm-hmm.
I'm starting to have doubts about the theory itself now.
It's been and then we can start having deeper conversations.
Yeah, Aaron's on his 9th reading, and I think the 6 different language of Trump's tariffs are. Yeah. Okay. You came in this morning, he was raving about it in the original Sanskrit. Okay, yes.
This has been a purposeful manipulation of a people that wanted to be nothing but comfortable. And so you're sold all boats rise with the tide, cheap goods, everybody everywhere benefits. And what we either didn't realize or didn't care about is that, they were going to treat people the exact same way in this equation as a flat screen TV. They're not the same thing.
See, that's why I'm wondering if the theory itself is bunk.
Because are you saying maybe that we may not be capable of carrying out this theory?
Correct. The assumption that human nature is not really real and not really for as long as we're on this mortal coil. I don't think human nature factors enough into free trade.
So this is the libertarianism of trade policy, is what you're saying?
I think so, maybe on some level.
Yes, if people are the same things as flat screen TVs, yes. This is the Sabbath made for man, not man for the Sabbath. This is supposed to help people. All people. It's a moral good. Economia, the household. That is what it should have been. And that's why I bought into it naively, because I thought ultimately that, I just quite frankly, I accept that like somehow you can think of these things outside of the eyes of theology. You can't think of anything outside of the eyes of theology. And we bought into that way too long.
I don't know. I'm open to everything you guys are saying. Because of the limits of human nature, I don't know that I can get to a point that I would dump on the theory altogether, because I could also see, if utilized with proper leverage, it is a check and balance on human nature. You see what I'm saying? Yep. That now we are providing a competitive marketplace, but that's not what we've been doing, essentially. What we've been doing is, in exchange for cheap goods, we import the third world and deport our essentially our textile manufacturing base right down to the medicines that we are being prescribed more than ever before. Okay, that's
suicidal.
That is societally, that is suicidal. I mean, even whatever in terms of mammon alone calculation, because you keep hearing them say, well, trade deficits are not necessarily bad. Well, I mean, what's the deficit? Okay, if the deficit is simply that I'm buying so many of your cheap goods to keep my cost of living low, that has created the deficit, then I can understand why you'd come to that conclusion. But what is the ancillary cost of you providing me those cheap goods? What else have I lost? And that's what you're alluding to with the economy.
Whatever you think of tariffs,
what is it good to profit the whole world if you lose your own soul in the process, right?
Hasn't this been the most honest economic conversation you can remember with tariffs?
Yes, I completely agree with that.
Even with all the risk involved, I get it, but it's way more honest.
I completely agree with that. I do. I agree with that. And I think it's clear we've not had an honest one for a long time. And I think I think those of us who grew up out of the Reagan era and learning from the Milton Friedman School of Economics, and that served the country very well for a generation. But I think now we are seeing on the other side of this, why some of our brethren who were pretty socially conservative kept voting Democratic during many of those years. And then all of a sudden why they switched and now started voting for Trump. And then I think this has more to do with the great exchange of the suburbs than even Trump's rhetoric, because the people in the suburbs, by and large, are not working those jobs that we shipped and left for dead, but are the ones buying the cheap goods at the local stores. You see what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. So, yeah.
It's a hell of a drug.
It is.
It is. I mean, it is.
It is.
It is a drug. You get addicted to cheap stuff. Really, that's basically the drug.
And that's what people say. Hey, good luck. So now you're telling people that being able to buy nice stuff cheaply is makes you a terrible American. That's not what we're saying. What we're saying is there's got to be there's some math here. What is the overall cost of the cheap goods? Because if it's costing us things that are tangible to the human condition, just beyond the sensual enjoyment I get from owning a good that provides me a distraction, then there's another cost there beyond what's on that price tag. It's a monkey paw, right?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Good stuff. All right.
Next up is from me, number 10, Man on a Mission. This is kind of an all-encompassing just view of what I think is this latest iteration of President Trump. We're not having just douchegasms on the weekly now. There's always going to be Trump flares to different things. Always going to be, hey, that's a random chicken wing there. But it's not just regular douchegasms. I think that's what we called them originally. It's not. He's been pretty disciplined. But even beyond that, with very limited exceptions, and the one exception, we've even criticized Thomas Massey on this program. Like, what are you trying to accomplish by doing, being the way that you are? But with very limited exceptions, from my vantage point, it seems like President Trump has gone out of his way to do whatever he can to not cause or sow division within coalitions, which is very important because this is a coalition victory for him. Mm-hmm. That's really good news. Beyond that, and I'm not saying this to sound condescending or Gnostic, I'm just saying it because I can't betray confidences. But if you knew what we knew kind of behind the scenes, just kind of getting a perspective of this that the average Joe doesn't get, Trump, and really, and I'll just say this personally, I've had personal interactions. Trump and MAGA have been far more magnanimous in ways they don't even need to be, with people they don't even need to be, than I would have ever expected.
If you take out a handful of people, I agree with that.
Yeah, if you take out a handful.
There's a handful of people that are very well known online that are absolute douche-tastic ass clowns. Let's just be honest.
Yes. I'm just talking about personally. Okay. I'm just talking about personal interactions that I've had.
Okay.
But Trump and MAGA that I've interacted with personally, or one-on-one ad hoc, far more magnanimous than maybe they even need to be. So that tells me that they're serious about governing. They're serious about holding this thing together as much as they possibly can. So I think he's on a mission right now.
I agree. And I think that kind of dovetails with what I said earlier in the show about there was a plan or a vision or a mission. Okay. And you're quantifying for me what I was trying to allude to at the top about a shared missiology. That it's not, for me, for the first time in really, it's been I've had a 12-year relationship with Donald Trump. And the first 3 years were very personal, interactive, and the last 9 have not been so. But this is the first time in those 12 years, either being approached by him to work for him, or just covering him, or opposing him, or voting for him. This is the first time that I have felt a shared missiology with him. Not co-belligerence, not shared opportunity, not lesser of two evils, not a better option for me and my belief system than people who want to end my way of life, but that I actually feel like him and I are part of the same cause. I have not felt that way before. And maybe I've been wrong in not feeling that way. I'm not saying that all my previous iterations of opinions and manifestations of thoughts on the Trump era were batted 1,000. I'm not saying that when I say that. I'm just expressing my own perspective. I'm not giving you like an apologetic. I'm just saying, for me, Steve Deace, for the first time in the 12 years, because you have to remember, man, Trump was coming to me about 10 minutes after the 2012 elections ended. So in the 12 plus years of my indirect relationship, professional and personal, with Trump in this era, this is the first time I truly feel like there is a shared missiology. And frankly, This is the first time probably since George W. Bush after 9/11, I feel like any national political leader in public office and I have a shared missiology.
Yeah, and you know what? Let me put a finer point on this, just so there's no ambiguity. Just what you interjected a little bit ago about a handful online. For every Laura Loomer and Roger Stone, which are somewhere between eye roll to get thee to the asylum, something like that, I have interacted with 15 to 20 who are far more charitable towards us. I
agree with that too. Yep.
Far more charitable towards me, us, the show, former foes on a political or primary level than, let's just say, the people that we were talking about on Friday's show during hour 2.
Right on. You have anything you want to add, Todd?
No. All good.
Okay.
All right. Next two, 11 and 12, are both from me and Steve. Number 11, messaging unanimity. And from 12, from Steve, the overall messaging, especially Levitt, JD, and Miller, has been on point. You want to go first, Steve?
I'll take this one first. And I may emphasize this too much because it's my area of particular expertise in when it comes to the political process and the vocation of politics, and it's also what I do for a living. But I also think that there is a great amount of power wielded or sacrificed in how words are wielded, how information is communicated, and I think the lack of trap doors of messaging, how solid and locked down this messaging has been, how on point it has been, to the point that the first couple days of rolling out the tariff thing would have just been, well, that wasn't that bad in the first term, but compared to how disciplined and on point everything had been up to this point, people are like, what's going on? They're like completely out of control and don't know what they're doing. They're making the whole thing up. You see, I mean, that's kind of, in a way, a testimony to how good it has been from the very jump. And there have been others. I mean, we mentioned Scott Bessant. He's been great too. But those three in particular, in terms of the amount of exposure they have been given the American people, those three in particular have been outstanding. I mean, I can't think of a single time Caroline Levitt, J.D. Vance, and forgive me, the third name that I mentioned there, Aaron, was
Stephen Miller, J.D. Vance, and Caroline Levitt. Yep.
I can't think of a single time when those three have been deployed that I've been like, And I mean, every single time I've been like, yeah. They're just all, and those three have been exceedingly impressive in terms of what's overall been a fairly impressive administration. Let me just give you one example of also just how much better at this that Trump is. If you watched the interview that R. Glenn Beck did with Trump the other day on Blaze TV, and Glenn asks Trump about Zelensky. Did you guys see this clip? And he goes, I thought he came in here, Glenn, this is Glenn's question basically. I thought he came in here and acted like a punk and completely disrespected you in the White House. In this first term, Glenn would have said, Mr. President, let's ask you about Zelensky and Ukraine. That guy's a complete, total loser punk. Came in here, totally disrespected us. What a douchebag. Okay? In this case, the president listens to the question. Lets Glenn be the bad guy. And when he sees that Glenn has already messaged what he wants to convey anyway, the president just looks at him and smiles and laughs and says, well,
you said that.
You said that. Okay? That is a level of presidential polish that frankly did not exist before. And I'm just going to tell you, as someone who has considered running for office in the past and gets incentivized to throw bombs in a job like this, whenever I've discussed it with people I know, one of the first things they say to me is, you are a great communicator, but if you really are serious about running for office one day, you're going to have to learn out there on the campaign trail, you do communicate differently than you do in front of an audience, on a microphone or on a stage. People in that situation are there for a presentation. But now if you're going to communicate with them as a candidate and maybe a prospective leader, they expect a different level of presentation and a level of polish. And so I just think overall it's been very impressive. There's only one time that I think I've offered even constructive criticism, and that was on the trade thing, that I thought they should make it more about decoupling from China. And they eventually pivoted to that like within 24 hours or so. So I don't think I had anything to do with it. It was just a coincidence. But that's about the only time where, that doesn't mean, again, I don't agree with every message. Don't think everything's a home run grand slam. But the only time that I thought, maybe we could really be doing this one better, that's about it. And given all the battlefronts as Aaron pointed out earlier, given all the battlefronts they've opened up on the enemy, that's a pretty good batting average, man.
Yep. So my kind of take on this, the messaging unanimity, is that everybody seems to be on the same message comprehensively, which is America first. During the first Trump administration, and, nobody expected him to win. Nobody expected him to win, and so nobody was expecting to be in his cabinet. So it was kind of a helter-skelter, hodgepodge, patchwork formation of different competing ideologies or takes or stew. It was just very much a melting pot. And so everybody kind of had their own little fiefdom. Everybody's kind of in the same kingdom now, it seems like. And I think a lot of that is because they had a plan, which you've addressed already, and everybody this time around knows exactly what they're walking into, exactly what they're getting themselves into. So I think the attitude has been from everybody within this administration, hang together or hang separately. And I think that has helped them with their messaging, because it's been, it couldn't be much better than it is right now, or than it has been the first 100 days.
We got about a minute left, Todd.
Yeah.
Want to add anything?
It's like I commented with Rubio, whether even if he didn't push hard enough when he could have earlier in life to reject the rules, now that they're not there, he loves not having to play by them. It's a great line from Groundhog Day. I'm not playing by their rules anymore. It's liberating.
And when, a lot of the battle is being able to communicate a vision. And communicating a vision that people think is accomplishable and aspirational and hope-filled, and by and large, they have done that. So that's been a highlight of the first 100 days for sure. What do we have, about 3 left?
We do, yeah.
All right, we'll get to those final 3 here when we come back. Stay tuned.
Steve Deace Show.
All right, back here on the Steve Deace Show, powered by Keksi, K-E-K-S-I, like sexy, but with a K. And it really should be like tasty, because these cookies are, holy crap, good. All right, the company founded by Pat Gray's family, Keksi's Cookies. These aren't your average store-bought cookies, folks. First of all, they're massive. I mean, they look like mini cakes made with real premium ingredients. You can taste the difference. None of the junk, man. Just incredible, amazing flavor. They've got limited edition flavors for Mother's Day, like German chocolate, white chocolate, strawberry, almond croissant. I tried that. Boy, that was... whew. That's like Dutch letter into a cookie. It was so good. All right. So the best part, Keksi ships their cookies straight to your door. So no matter where you are or where mom is, if you want to get her this for Mother's Day, they can get you or her a box. And you're going to want maybe one for you and her. They're that good. All right, go to Keksi.com, K-E-K-S-I, K-E-K-S-I, Keksi.com. Use code DACE15 to get an exclusive 15% discount. That's DACE15 at Keksi.com. Keksi.com, K-E-K-S-I. Use the code DACE15 to get 15% off at Keksi.com. All right, we've got 3 more of our top 15 things that we either learned, loved, and looking forward to coming out of Trump's first 100 days that are being commemorated this week. Aaron, let's roll.
Next two are from Todd. USAID exposed and arresting judges, plural.
Well, the arresting judges is a very recent event, and I mean, it is justice. You're not above the law. You thought you were. You thought you could do anything. Having experienced...
And in fairness, we gave these people 40 years of experience to demonstrate that they could behave such a way.
Yeah.
Yeah, because we weren't doing anything. Yeah.
And, I have multiple experiences in my life of pushing abusive authority to what I hoped would be its limit, and I've had successes. When I was arrested by abusive police and I came out clean on the other side, I've been less successful, like in the Carlisle school district. But it was important to do nonetheless, because any abuse of such authority ultimately leads to a tyranny that kills everything you love and hold dear. You must fight it. And so with these judges, this is fantastic. And with USAID, it's a similar tyranny, but it was one of those tyrannies hiding under like the same thing with the tranny madness. Started with love is love. Look at how they even named it, USAID. And ultimately, all of that was a money laundering service to take the money of hard-paying taxpayers, funnel it through places across the world, and give it to then entities that actually were going to war with you as an American and trying to hurt you. And that, if there's a lot about Doge that ongoing, Daniel Horowitz has pointed out, may not be realized in terms of any ultimate financial savings, inefficiencies with starts and stops and not getting it done. But honestly, just USAID getting exposed for the total farce that it was is a very good thing.
Well, I mean, your explanation there, man, is tour de force, no doubt. I mean, in the analogy you drew there, I mean, this originally starts as a co-benevolent association to make sure no matter who wins, Republicans or Democrats, within the right of center, left of center, Overton window for a generation, they still understand the evils of communism and stay on point. And then that thing ends up becoming a co-benevolent grifting association of the two parties instead. Yeah.
Just an incredible illustration of how progressivism is cancer. Cancer creeps. It always creeps. Mm-hmm. It always creeps. It always infests everything. So what was designed as a bipartisan initiative, really, to defeat or to stand up to the threat of another kind of cancer, which is it's the same cancer. It's progressivism by a different name, communism. Mm-hmm. It in and of itself was infested by progressivism, by communism at the end of the day. Just an excellent illustration. And we had this conversation as well when we had, I think it was Data Republican on. Even though USAID in and of itself, even though the Doge cuts in and of themselves are just a handful of chicken feed in the vast, grain bin of the federal government, just the illustration of programs like these alone, hopefully will start illustrating to people just how rotten and how just anti-American the American government is.
That was good. We got one left?
One left. It's from you.
All right.
It has clarified the direction we needed to take the show.
When I first started doing this, I mean, our goal, and it's still our goal, but the way that we thought of making a biblical worldview the prime directive, but the way that we thought we had to do that was use my knowledge of pop culture, the fact that I spent the first 30 years of my life outside of the covenant of God and more in line with the world. And so the expressions, the euphemisms, the kinds of things the world finds funny, I could tap into those things in maybe ways that a way more seasoned saint no longer had interest in and was completely alienated from. And so therefore we could use some of the edgier aspects of my personality to try and draw people from the broader side of the culture onto a narrow road. Or in other words, that I could be more relevant, frankly. And that's why we've had some of those edgier elements on the show from the very beginning. What's transpired in the last 6 months or so, and especially has become critical mass for me in just the last couple of months. We were discussing the other day a good description for Friday's podcast, where I spent so actually it's just Friday, where I spent a good deal of time talking about why we need to have patience, what the Trump administration is up against, right? And we pointed out, they're doing this just amongst ourselves. We pointed out, guys, they're doing this with little help from the church and no help whatsoever from the U.S. Congress. It's basically the Trump White House, Trump presidency, Trump administration versus the entire spirit of the age. Okay, let's give him some time. Okay, and the doing it with little help from the church, seeing a political movement out in front of much of the church in terms of providing a moral alternative to the immoral, a morally sane alternative to the immoral insanity we're up against. We're literally up against a worldview of Michael Caine's Alfred. Some men just want to watch the world burn. And that's just not a sustaining process. That's how you're not a movement, but a moment. We've got to engage the church. And that's why we're even more intentional right now about doing theology on the show. Even more intentional right now about invoking the Word of God than we ever have been before. You've probably noticed I don't necessarily use maybe some of the expressions and some of the things that I have said in the past as frequently as I did before for that reason. We've even recategorized the podcast and how it's being marketed and what category it's being listed in and marketed to, because it's very clear the church has to be discipled before anything else. That much of the church is on the sidelines. And what we need to now find out is we've evolved from, can I use the things that I know of this world to bring more of this world into the narrow road of a biblical worldview, to how many people on the narrow road even know what the biblical worldview is? Have heard it preached, know what it means, how would they apply it? Because ultimately you start, what's the Great Commission? First to Jerusalem, then Judea, then Samaria, and then to the ends of the earth. You go inside out in the Great Commission, not outside in. And if we're sitting here trying to go outside in terms of our own prime directive as a show, but the inside out ain't working, that's not going to work. We got to go inside out too. And since now I've got to reach more people that know my language than I did before, I have to clean up my language and some of the things that we said in ways different than we did before. All right, so I'm not Father Stu necessarily right now talking to the prisoners, that scene you love so much, Todd. I can speak jive, basically, when Mark Wahlberg does that. Now I'm actually sitting at the papal enclave. I'm at the Council of Nicaea. I'm at the conference with the bishops, okay? Come now, brothers, let us reason together, right? I'm now more Paul at the synagogue than I am Paul at the Areopagus now. When Mars Hill was pretty much my model when I got into this, well, right now my model is I'm Paul going to the synagogue trying to reason with my fellow Jews that Yeshua is Messiah. And the conversation that Paul has at the synagogue is different than the one Paul has at the Areopagus on Mars Hill with the Greeks. It's a different conversation. He's talking to a totally different group of people. Because the church, for all the talk about don't be left behind, the church right now is being left behind. We could, it'd be a copyright infringement, but we could just write a new book called Left Behind in a totally different context. The church has been left behind. And it's got to catch up. And we got to bring the church into the fight and bring the church up. And watching the Trump administration, I've been thinking about this for about a year, but watching the Trump administration since the start of this year now take on these fights and take the leadership of them with very little wingman from the church, let alone leadership, because that's really what the church should be doing here. It should be the other way around. The church should be pointing at the administration saying, this is what is expected of you. As opposed to the administration turning to the church and saying, hey, man, can I'm kind of tapped out. I've thrown 120 pitches here in the 7th inning. Can you bring somebody in out of the bullpen? And much of the church is like the manager in the dugout saying, just go ahead and finish it out. Well, my arm's about to fall off, man. Okay, I'm spent, So that's what I meant by that final observation. Gentlemen, your thoughts?
Again, this was... the fact that we're getting to have the conversation with the tenor that we're having it was something that seemed to be nearly impossible not very long ago.
Yep.
And knowing what's at stake, thinking as I do about my children's future all the time, to have the ball in our hands and to constantly be on offense, I'm not going to look that gift horse in the mouth. I'm taking the ball and running with it to the extent that I can.
So I, after the election, just decided and really committed myself to analyzing the world as it is, not as I would like it to be, fighting with the army that you have, not the one that you think you need or deserve. What that is a tenet of realism. Just analyzing things the way that they are. Now, you cannot just stay in realism, in my opinion, if you are under a biblical worldview, operating under a biblical worldview. Realism has to wing to optimism. Sometimes it can wing to pessimism, but I think you have to wing to optimism. Because what are we trying to accomplish? Just by analyzing it for analyzing its sake, for realist, you have to point it somewhere. But realism is really just a road mark, a road sign on the way to getting where you would like to go. You can't just start with optimism because that'll result in magical thinking and Pollyanna-ish. But you can't just start from a place of pessimism either because you're just going to go down that road and you're going to drive yourself nuts.
Sounds like you need discernment.
Discernment, yeah, exactly. That's the way that I've been looking at this Trump administration through the first 100 days. Realism. What is Congress? What is the judiciary? What is the real state of those institutions? And then I see the Trump administration doing their best to try to fight back against the very real threat from the judiciary and the very real nothing from Congress. So, again, I would just encourage you, take a realist view of the world. Yeah, there are some things that are really bad, but there are some things that are really good. But that has to wing to get you to where you want to go. And I think the Trump administration is trying their best to do that. You mentioned this in passing earlier. Maybe it's because it wasn't totally the digital media age. And so you're not getting minute by minute, hour by hour news cycles. But even back during the George W. Bush administration, who was an evangelical, correct? Who was supposedly one of us. I don't recall truly, even during the first Trump administration, although it was a stark contrast to the Republicans that they had tried to foist on us in the interim between President Bush and President Trump. But this iteration of this Trump administration, this iteration of Trump, don't really see an entire force, political force and government force, that identifies with people like us, or at least is not ashamed of it. That's a really cool thing. Just don't, as Todd said, don't look that gift horse in the mouth.
Amen. Now, you do want to look the gift horse over at the backyard butchers in the mouth and take advantage of what they're offering you, which is meat straight from the farm without all that dangerous crap in it, thick, delicious. Also from faith-based America First families and founders that are ranchers from deep in the heart of Texas there. No fillers, no hormones, none of that other junk in the meat, all right? And their cows eat a mostly grass-based diet as well, so you get the absolute best tasting beef there is. All of their cuts delivered to you 100% U.S. born raised and processed. Other companies out there are trying to hide the fact that most of their cuts are from overseas or don't have the same standards as our products. But no growth hormones, no preservatives, straight from ranches in Texas. And go get their best box yet, the Steakhouse box. You'll be king of the grill. Has something for the entire family that they're going to love, from T-bones to fillets and incredible burgers and more. Go to backyardbutchers.com/Deace. That's backyardbutchers.com/Deace and use the promo code Deace for 20% off. Promo code Deace for 20% off at backyardbutchers.com/Deace. Well, this, I think, has been a very intriguing exercise, which is what we hoped when we determined to do this as a special edition of the show here on a Monday. If all goes well, we will not be here tomorrow because we will be making presentations to do a special edition of the program on Wednesday that is going to blow minds. Cats and dogs will be living together. Stay Puft Marshmallow Man will be strolling down Main Street where you live. You'll realize this is what happens when you cross the streams. How did this possibly occur? You will look for a star in the east. Okay, maybe it's not that big of a deal. All right. But we're hoping we can pull this off for you. If not, we'll just be back here schlepping again on Wednesday of next week doing the same mediocrity we typically do. All right, everybody have a great Monday. Hopefully we don't see you tomorrow and we see you Wednesday instead from a very special show. Until then, Romans 8:28.